Hey, what's happening, everybody? I once again, for YouTubers, have mucked up a setting, but everybody else won't care. I'll fix it in real time. Nobody needs to see my face that gigantic. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. It's Thursday. Keep losing track. Keep losing track of what day it is. I'm Dan Besbris. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris, and you can follow Old Man Squad at Old Man Squad. And, you'll get all the show drops, and it'll follow you back. So that's fun. Please like, rate, subscribe as you settle into the show for the day. This one is going to be an action-packed morning adventure. We've got Raphielle Johnson coming up here in like the next 15 seconds. And as I will put his face on the screen while I'm doing this, I had this plan, Raph, and we talked about this about 20 seconds before going on air. I was like, oh, great, we're going to do Raph's picks for the day. And then it hit me as I was like running some garbage downstairs. Oh, Raph was also the 10 slot in Josh's mock 2 weeks ago. And we haven't talked at all about on this show in any capacity anyone with the 10th pick. So now, before I even say good morning, Raph, I'm kind of jamming a lot into this show. So to that end, good afternoon to you. Good morning to everybody else.
I'm in the morning.
Yeah. Oh, you're morning? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm in Tucson.
Oh, you're in Arizona?
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought you were on Eastern time. All right, so good morning then. That makes it easier.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
I don't know why I thought you were on Eastern time. I got my zones all screwed up here. Raphielle Johnson is at Raphielle J, RAPHIELLEJ on social media. He is with the RotoWorld. And we've got a lot to talk about. So I want to just jump straight into it now after all that. I say jump straight into it after 2 minutes of preface. We're going to do your guys first, and then we're going to loop back around to a little bit from the mock draft. So you gave me 3 last night. One of them is in the thumbnail, so there's a giveaway there. Do you want to start with the dude whose face people can see on their screen?
Yeah, let's start with Lauri Markkanen. He's had a really good 2-season run in Utah in terms of like the per game stats and all that. Played 55 games last season. Obviously, there are going to be some availability concerns. I think he only played 5 games after March 1st last season, and then 9 the season prior. So when you're on a rebuilding team, you don't want to assume that a guy's going to get shut down when you go into your drafts, but it's something that you kind of have to take into account when going through the draft process with a player like Markkanen, whether or not he's going to be available for the postseason. If you need to look at the Jazz roster and make any other accommodations later in your drafts or during the waiver process throughout the season, just to make sure you're covered. So 55 games, he's only played 65 or more once in the last 6, and that was a 22-23 season. Played 61 the year prior, but other than that, he hasn't been over 60 even. So that kind of underlines the availability concerns, but when he's on the floor, he's really good. 23 points, 8 boards, 2 assists, about 1 steal, half a block, and 3 3-pointers per game. Close to a 50-40-90 player. 9 cat per game value is 13th, 25th, and 8 cat totals outside of the top 50. But I think with his ADP being 27 last year, and thus far, #basketball has him at 33.2 at this early point in the process, I kind of wonder, is he a lock for a 3rd-round guy? Should people be willing to reach toward the end of round 2 or hold off and let it be someone else's problem? And that's the first question I would start out with for Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah, because, his pre-rank moved ever so slightly. He's at 27 now on the Yahoo board. I believe he was 32 before that, so just a little bit sooner. I assume, Raph, the great fear with everyone, I don't want to spend too much time on each guy because we've got a lot to cover today, but it seems like this is a price being built in pretty much because of the assumption of a tank, because there's really he was a turn value last year per game in 9 cat. Like you just said, this is a guy, and his role is not changing considerably. But to play the other side of it, 2 seasons back, despite Utah moving into a tank mid-season, which is pretty much what they've done 2 years in a row, he got up into the mid-60s in games. So who's to say, Where do you think that number ends up with him? I know it's really hard to make an estimate on that, but do you think he can get into the mid-60s this season, or is that a pipe dream?
I feel like he's someone where as long as you get to 60, you'll get good fantasy value out of him. The question is as always is when will those 60 games come? Like if he's on the shelf for most of March, it's not really going to help you in playoffs for fantasy. So I think that's one thing you're kind of struggling with, but you kind of hope that he can hit 60 because it's not something that he's done very often in recent years. So I think that's the concern there.
Do you, with him being at 27 now, moving from kind of back end of third to more towards the front end of the third, do you still like him with that slightly earlier shift, or is this like, are we getting close to where the fear outweighs the production? I know this. I do this all the time because you know me. Everybody knows me. I'm a Kawhi Leonard guy. There's always that like scale of justice moment: fear versus production. Where does that tip for you on Markkanen?
I would say end of the second would be. I think early third is fine for him. Anywhere in the third round. I think if you hit the fourth, that's when you're talking about steal category. So I think there's not really much of a gap there between too soon and then a steal for Markkanen. But I think anywhere in the third is fine for me personally.
Sweet. All right. Where should we head next? Who's player number 2 on the board for you?
That would be LaMelo Ball. We talk about availability concerns. He's played in 58 games total in the last 2 seasons. 51 games or fewer in 3 of his 4 NBA seasons. I think the one exception was a 75-game year, his second season. So that's your biggest concern with him. But when he's on the floor, he's really good. About 24 points, 5 boards, 8 assists, nearly 2 steals, 3.2 threes last season. 22nd and 9 cap per game value, but the totals, the availability, not even top 250 player for totals. ADP of 13 last season. No way he reaches that this year just because of the injury concerns. The Yahoo pre-rank at 19. Hashtag basketball has an ADP of 29.4 right now. I think third round is fair. I don't know if I could use a top 2 round pick on him, even with the tantalizing talent and the fact that they're still kind of building around him there in Charlotte. I can't trust him for the injury reasons. So I think I wouldn't go anywhere before the third round for him. And it may be a case of even just allowing him to be someone else's problem in fantasy.
Yeah, I think you're the first person that's come on the pod that's argued the other side on LaMelo Ball. And I'm really glad you did, because especially given the most recent Yahoo board adjustment where he went from 29 pre-rank up to 19. That was one of the biggest jumps of anybody in the early rounds, along with I think Kawhi jumped 15 slots and Şengün jumped 9. But LaMelo was right in there with the biggest upward leapers. And it feels like this is all because he says he's going to wear ankle braces. I'm really worried. He said that words. What do words mean in August? Not much, right? Don't we? I don't know. I'm always on the side of I kind of want to see things before I really take the plunge. And sometimes that puts me behind on certain guys when they make a leap. There was no way I was going to get Scotty Barnes last year. The way I handicapped fantasy basketball, I didn't see the big blocks jump. I didn't see the big whatever jump. And I'm okay with that. I'll miss that one. But there's other ones that are the chances feel much more obvious. I was in on Tyrese Maxey last year. People say they hear my name and they just think I don't draft anybody young, but it's about understanding what translates. And this is a different one. This is a guy who, like you said, has played a full season 1 out of 4 effectively. And now he's going to cost you a second round pick. That's absolutely terrifying for me. Did you like him when his pre-rank was 29? It sounded like you did. Third round, you said take a shot there, but
I think may be a bit much. I didn't mind him at that pre-rank. That's what I would say. But yeah, I can't see myself using a top 30, even a third round pick period on him. I think I can excuse it mid to late third, but I wouldn't do it personally. I think, again, he's someone that I would allow another manager to have to deal with. And beyond that, I think in deeper leagues, you have to consider a Trey Man, like with a final round pick. I don't think under normal circumstances you would think that, but here's a guy who was 80th in totals after the trade deadline when he was traded there, just outside of the top 100 and 8 cat from trade deadline onward. Average about 2 steals per game, so you're getting some value there. Solid rebounder for his size at 4.5 per game. 5.2 assists. I didn't think it would be that high for him, given what we saw in Oklahoma City, but to get some sneaky value there, he may be someone that's like a late round addition in a deeper league just to kind of cover yourself just in case those ankle braces don't exactly work out for LaMelo.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrifying. And I know, and there's this sort of like sour taste left in folks' mouths as well with Ball. I had him in one of all my leagues last season, and that team was dead a month into the year. The team was just cooked. Like, everything else needed to go right. It didn't, because how often does every other thing go right on a fantasy team besides like the one disaster? And so that team was mid-pack. Like, I did a lot of stuff to try to get it back in the mix, but if you don't have a first-round pick, you're in so much trouble, and it's not that different with a second rounder. Said the guy who's willing to take shots on old dudes all the time, I guess. Raph, we're talking to Raphielle Johnson. Before we get to your third dude, I like to do promo mid-show when people are still laser focused in. What do you got going on over at RotoWorld right now?
Right now, we're behind the scenes prepping our draft guide content, player rankings, team profiles, player profiles, bunch of features. That will likely start to unveil in mid-September. So we're a couple weeks out from that. We're all hard at work, myself, Noah, Zach, and Amir. So hopefully everyone keeps an eye out for that, because the more fantasy basketball content, the better. I know it can get confusing for some people, but I think it's a space where we can deal with a lot of voices, a lot of quality output in terms of the product.
Yeah, totally agree. And then, for a lot of folks, you find voices that you trust. You can kind of glom onto them I often say that, like, you don't want to have everything going on at the same time, but if you find someone that really speaks to you, that's such a nice way to like settle in. And this is fun, man. This is fun. At the end of the day, we're busting our butts. We're grinding away. We're staring at basketball numbers for hours and hours every day, but it's fun work. So, join us on the ride. Join Raph on the ride, and everybody knows RotoWorld. That's one of the OGs. Who's the third guy for you today?
The third guy, as a Knicks fan, looking forward to speaking about Julius Randle. Dislocated shoulder injury on January 27th that ended his season at that point. He was working to come back, but it just wasn't going to happen. Played in 46 games. Really good, good averages, 24 points, 9.2 boards, 5 assists. Didn't give you much defensively. You're talking about 0.8 combined steals and blocks, 1.7 threes, 47% from the field. Had a rough year from three, though. I think it was about 31%, 78% from the foul line. 9 cat per game value, 129. The issue was turnovers, 3.5 per game. Top 75 player in 8 cat when you remove those turnovers. The ADP right now, 65.5 on hashtag basketball. I know Yahoo has them at 65 in terms of their rankings. Couple variables come into play here. You got the addition of Mikal Bridges, a full season of OG Anunoby, who has his own injury issues to deal with in his past. So I think, interestingly enough, with the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein, I know there have been some talks about Julius playing a little more at center. Looked this up on Cleaning the Glass. He only played 1% of his minutes there last season for obvious reasons. You've got Hartenstein, you got Mitchell Robinson, Precious Achiuwa. After the trade, they had him as well. The high point for him was 5% of his minutes. That was his first season with the Knicks, 2019-20. Really high points per possession numbers on offense, but again, a really small sample size. I think with Randle, the question is not just the injury concerns, because he's had a few season-ending injuries in recent years, but also positioning. And with all the 3/4s that they have in that roster, is he going to play more time at the 5, and will it be effective? So that, I think that would be my question with Julius.
So do you like him at 65, or you don't like him at 65?
I don't know if I'd go that high. I think I could use like 75 at 80 range, but I don't know if I can go 65. Yeah.
And in 9 cat, are you interested in him at all?
Oh, yeah.
Barely.
I don't think so. Just because I think the turnovers will come down. Like he averaged 2.7 the season prior,
Yeah.
and you have more playmaking options on that roster now. So I think he should get back under 3. I don't know if I would go 65 and 9 cat. Like in 8 cat, I would potentially consider it, but not 9 cat.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one as well. And I get it on the head-to-head side. Everybody's sort of staring at these counting stats, and points, boards, assists are all very good for Randle, but no defensive stats to speak of any kind. He's truly awful in those departments. Turnovers very high. Field goal percent was a little better this last year, but he's a negative in both percentages. To me, he fits more of the kind of points league mold. And even when, even if I am punting something in 9cat, it usually doesn't justify the reach. Like you could probably get someone else here that's also punting whatever category is you're punting, who probably then moves farther in front. So I think I'm pretty much in agreement with you on this one as well. And I think I'm in agreement with you on all 3 of the guys you brought up today. But before I let you go, I want to get into just briefly, we're not going to go we're going to deep dive the mock draft, but Raph had the 10th pick in Josh Lloyd's mock draft from a couple weeks ago. And again, it's not a spot on the floor, spot in the draft floor that we've talked about all that much. And it's kind of a weird one because, you actually had a shot at Trae Young in this one, and you went Kevin Durant instead, which is kind of interesting because in head-to-head, you oftentimes see someone lean into the guy who's great at 3 things and also terrible at 3 things, and you instead went more well-rounded with your first-round pick with KD. And I'm not so much interested in how you feel about Kevin Durant because I love KD. He's unbelievably well-rounded, easy top 12 guy all the time. But why go the well-rounded route instead of the polar up, polar down route that you're seeing so much of in head-to-head these days?
Honestly, a 9 cat, high turnovers scare me. That's kind of why I look to avoid Trae Young and 9 cat. I think he will be better this year just because no DeJounte Murray. It'll be his show. It always was his show, but you don't have another point guard in the lineup now. So I think he'll be better, but the turnovers always concern me. And I tried my first round pick. I tend to try to go with guys who can potentially win as many categories as possible. So that's why that was the other reason why I went with KD in that spot.
Is there someone else were you hoping someone would get to you at 10 that didn't, or was KD a guy that you were targeting to begin with?
I was hoping for Tatum, but that was kind of a pipe dream.
Yeah.
At the 10 spot, I didn't really like the 10 spot, personally.
Yeah, it might be the worst spot this year because you're not everybody says, 7 is hard because there's no one that's going to make a choice for you. But at 10, it's almost the same, but just with fewer of the options that people don't really want to use to start their team. Have you, when you play head to head, if you're leaning away from turnovers, what do you think about this group, the 7 through 13 range? It's a really confusing spot that I think we're all kind of you can make an argument for and against basically every single dude in that run.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the one person that I'm dying to avoid from that group would be Embiid, just because of the medical history. Last year, he'd done well up to last season, the 2 seasons prior, I believe. But
yeah, he was in the 60s, which is a win for him.
But then you're coming off of a injury shortened season where he came back, had another procedure after the playoffs, then played in the Olympics. That's something we're going to be working on for the draft guide, kind of looking at the potential impact of playing in the Olympics on some of these guys. And that kind of concerned me because his playing time was up and down, but he was still playing basketball, highly competitive basketball. And for someone with his injury history, I think that's a bit of a concern. And you're definitely not going to let Embiid fall out of the first round, but he's a guy for me that I'm leaning towards a do not draft list for him personally.
That's an interesting. There's 2 things that I want to pull away from that before, and I know we're winding down here, but I had a couple more questions. Talking to Raphielle Johnson at Raphielle J of RotoWorld basketball. So on the Embiid front, and then also on the Olympics front, and Dan Titus and Adam King and I were talking about this on an episode of Between Two Dans yesterday. This concept of like, how much do we take away from the Olympics? And I think we ended up kind of settling on like, look for things that are extremely unusual.
Yeah.
And maybe ignore the guys who just like quietly were fine during the Olympics. Like, look, I don't want Anthony Davis putting more miles on his body, but he was fine. He played, looked healthy. Like, nothing went wrong for AD. I think I'm sure he landed funny at one point, but he does that once every 4 ball games, so you can't really worry about it. But then there's the other side of like Jamal Murray, who looked wrong, and Embiid, until frankly the last 2 games, he just didn't look good at all in the Olympics. And then they needed his offense and he sort of kicked it up a little bit. Is that also kind of how you fall on how to interpret players in the Olympics without getting into the exact specifics of what's going to be in that RotoWorld article?
Yeah, I would say so. It's tough because you think back to Tokyo, those were really strange Olympics where they were played in a bubble, so it's
right.
Completely different set of circumstances, and also played a year after they were supposed to be played. So there's so many different variables when you compare Tokyo, and then before that, 2016. I can't remember where 2016 the Olympics were, but that's besides the point. But
that's a different.
Yeah, I think
it's a different lifetime ago, man.
Yeah, I think you guys are onto something with that. You're kind of looking for outliers in terms of roles and also how guys played.
It was in Brazil, role. By the way. I looked.
Oh yeah, I worked those Olympics. I should know better. Oh. Yeah, it was Rio. Yeah, getting old, man. But you know,
you and me both.
But yeah, that's kind of the thing where you're looking for those outliers, whether it be like a way a guy looked, way their role within the system, like Tatum not playing as much. Maybe you aren't as concerned about him as some other guys because he really wasn't in a rotation for most of the Olympics. So I think those are kind of things that you're looking for when you're assessing the potential impact of the Olympics on the following season.
Last question, very last one. This time, I promise. On the Joel Embiid front, this argument, and this is going on in my head literally every moment of every day because I'm a sick individual and I need other things to think about. But there comes a point when the players around Embiid on the draft board, now we're back to fantasy again instead of reality, are so much worse than him per game that you start to think to yourself, okay, at what point am I no longer able to beat some of these other teams that have, say, Wemby and Jokic with their first-round pick, unless I take the big swing on Embiid? How do you balance that in your brain? Because that one's one that's going to be eating me up literally until the moment I make my first-round pick in every league I'm in.
Yeah, that's tough. Like, man, that's
really. I don't know what to do with that one.
Yeah, I think if anything, that just makes your second and third round picks even more important.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes you less inclined to take a swing with either one of those or more inclined to do so. I would lean towards less inclined just because you want to have that reliable value in terms of availability and production. I know Adam in his build, he took Devin Booker and then Bam Adebayo. So he's got cover right there in terms of Bam, in case Joel were to suffer an injury. You have another high-level center, in an early round pick. So I think maybe that entered his thinking, and I would be more inclined to do something like that than to take a swing on someone where you're not sure if you're going to get that high-level value.
Yeah, but you don't want to pile up too many risks on that front. It's a tough question, and I don't think there's a right or wrong or perfect answer to it. It's just like, okay, I got the 11th pick. Embiid is still there. The other guy that's there for me is like, Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah.
I got to go Embiid now. If Sabonis is my first round pick, I'm not going to beat the team that started with Nikola Jokic. And my best case scenario is like second place in this league. And so I got to take the swing. But then, like you said, you kind of have to buttress that with some other ideas. And actually, I'll mention something on the show after you go, but exploring the Joel Embiid risk factor is something that we'll probably cover on one of the episodes tomorrow on this show. Rhett Bauer has been working in secret on what he calls a Joel Embiid proof build, where you can win big with him and you can survive without him. And I'm very excited to see what Rhett came up with, because that dude's brain is crazy, and sometimes crazy in a frightening way. Raph, I'm officially letting you go. I asked you two extra questions. I squeezed them in at the end here. Raphielle Johnson at Raphielle J on Twitter. He is the pride of RotoWorld and apparently lives in Tucson and not on the East Coast because I'm an idiot. Raph, thanks so much, man, for carving out time today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Raphielle Johnson hitting us with the other side of the LaMelo Ball discussion. I'm really glad. I really, truly am glad that we finally got someone on the show that was a little bit still afraid of LaMelo Ball, because it kind of seems like everybody has just forgotten about last year at the first hint of ankle braces. And to quote the great Shooter McGavin, everybody's in on this. Yeah, well, and then what is the guy? I think his name is Doug. He says something like, yeah, he's been a bit. Well, I'm not, Doug. I'm not, Doug. I'm also afraid of LaMelo Ball in the middle of the second round. Like I told Raph, I had one team last year with LaMelo Ball on it, and that team got buried. Just freaking buried. I was right in the mix through 4 weeks, and then just buried, or whatever it was. Maybe made it 6 weeks or something like that. It wasn't enough, though. It was not enough. Here's, by the way, the rest of Raphael's team from the mock draft. He went Kevin Durant in the first slot, Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, Evan Mobley, Miles Turner, Brandon Miller, Jalen Green, Trey Murphy III, Derek Lively, Chris Paul, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Amen Thompson, Josh Hart, and Jonathan Isaac. I'm with every passing moment, I'm becoming more and more in on Amen Thompson, where he's getting drafted. You know what? I think I got a little bit surprised. But by the way, kudos to Matt Lawson on yesterday's show for redirecting my gaze. I had sort of like looked at all of the Thompson stuff with Şengün out, and in my mind I was like, okay, well, Şengün's back, but also Thompson's likely played his way ahead of a bunch of the other dudes on that team, and really only needs about 25, 26 minutes to be a top 80 to 90 range fantasy dude. So the upside, he's one of those guys that's going late where you're like, okay, I actually see the built-in upside here. He has a floor of, whatever. Like if he only gets 20 minutes a game, obviously that's not good enough. But for someone who's getting drafted, where is he at? He's 127 on the Yahoo board right now, talking about Thompson. Like he doesn't, that's going to cost you, that's an 11th round pick. Yeah, that's an obvious 11th round pick, because the other guys going in that range are either the very safe, no upside floor guys, so like a KCP, a Gary Trent, something like that. There are the guys around him that are, I don't know, like I'm not sure what everybody sees. Like you got Horford, who I'm interested in, and then you got all these other guys that have no pathway to 9 cat value. Like I don't dislike Shaedon Sharpe, but also, unless there's a marked change in field goal percent, there's no hope there. That dude shot 41% last year on volume. He was not a big steals guy. He's not a big blocks guy. He's not a big assists guy. It was points, some rebounds, some threes, and a brutal field goal percent. Like and this is not me picking on Shaedon Sharpe. Maybe his field goal percent does jump from 41 to 47 or 48 or something like that. Maybe something wild happens, and that's how someone like that turns a corner. But with Amen Thompson, the point I was trying to make is not that I don't like Shaedon Sharpe, although I'm not going to draft him. The point is that with Amen Thompson, you don't need those things to happen. The fantasy stat set was already good enough. Those guys don't tend to punch around late in a draft like that. Think of it from this perspective. Anybody outside the top 10 rounds, so the Yahoo board 121 on, how many of those guys have a fantasy game? And you guys are all looking still, YouTubers are still looking at Raphielle Johnson's mock draft. I'll leave it there. By the way, like, rate, and subscribe mid-show. Reminder, please like, rate, and subscribe. I forgot to take a commercial break, so they'll just get inserted when they get inserted. Oopsies. But you know what? Rapid fire some names here for you. And how many of these guys have the fantasy stat set in 9-cat where even in starters minutes, tell me how many of these guys in starters minutes would have 9-cat value at top 100 or better? Dennis Schroeder? No. Andrew Nembhard? No. And I'm talking about if nothing else happens for their team. So like with Schroeder, if the Nets move one other guy, there's a chance he gets there. With Nembhard, a couple guys probably need to get hurt. That's how he would end up doing enough assists, basically. Sharp, currently no. Keontae George, now if you're not punting a couple things. Malik Monk, same story. Need to be punting. Horford, yeah. In starters minutes, 9-cat value, he'll have it. Amen Thompson, he'd have it. Trace Jackson Davis, he would have it in starters minutes. Kelly Olynyk would have it, but he ain't playing starters minutes. Josh Hart, not going to have starters minutes. So this is the other thing. Like, even if these guys did have starters minutes, would it get there? Gary Trent, barely. Aaron Gordon, punt free throw. KCP, barely. Wendell Carter Jr., no. Said starters minutes for multiple years. He can't get inside the top 115, basically. Brandon Pajemski, I don't think so. Clarkson, no. Healed, I mean, yes, but he's not playing starters minutes. That's the thing. So you're looking for a guy that has the fantasy profile. Forget starters minutes. Maybe I should be asking, how many of these guys could get there in 24, 25 minutes? The answer is, out of 30 players that I'm looking at on one particular 30 span of Yahoo players, if these guys got 25 minutes on a court, would they have top 100 value? For Horford, yeah. Amen Thompson, yeah. Trace Jackson Davis, maybe. Daniel Gafford, there's one in 25 minutes he could get there. That's it for that 30 span. And you go farther down the board, it gets worse. So you might as well look at a guy, and I don't know why I got sidetracked by Amen Thompson here, but it's really more of like a draft strategy. How do you pick the guys you're targeting after 120? Look at the guys who have 9-cat value, top 100 or better in 25 minutes. Start from there. And then you can branch out. Obviously, we're going to look at each one of these players individually because some of them will get more minutes than that. Some are going to get less. Make your calls from there. Gary Trent Jr. in his Bucks role probably needs 32, 33 minutes a game to crack the top 100. KCP, same kind of story. But they have a better shot of getting there than, I don't know, Brandon Pajemski, Jordan Clarkson. Like, you try to gauge where the minutes are coming from and then what they actually turned into. All right, we'll put a pin in this one. Keep this one on the more brief side. If you're a fan of the brevity thing. The dude was a fan of the brevity thing. Big thank you once again to Raphielle Johnson of RotoWorld for hopping on the show with us today. We went over Raphielle's 3 guys he wanted to talk about and some mock or real, I guess, draft strategy, what to do if you're towards the end of that first round. And Raph, in an interesting twist, he's also, I think, been the first person to come on the show and said, even in head-to-head, you can start with a well-rounded player and you can still be okay. And the reason for that, and we probably should have gotten a little bit farther into that, is you just open yourself up for other options. It's why I like Jokic over Wemby still at the top of the draft. You just give yourself more avenues because think of it this way. If Raph took Trae Young at 10 and the correct pairing player didn't come around to him after that, whoever that might have been, with Trae Young, you pair him with Domantas Sabonis if you want to wipe out the heavy guard build, or maybe you go, Donovan Mitchell or LaMelo Ball if you're trusting him, or James Harden if you want to lean into the guard build. If those guys are not there, and then you're suddenly like, ooh, Trae Young and Devin Booker together, kind of a weird build. Trae Young and Anthony Edwards together, weird build. But if you go KD, you can pretty much go with any of those other dudes. And that second pick starts to dictate which direction your team goes instead of the first. It's almost like kicking the can down the road a little bit. Say, I'm going to have a great foundational piece because Kevin Durant is a positive in points, in, I think it was boards last year too. I can triple check myself on this. Where was KD in boards? Yeah, barely. Small positive in threes, boards, assists, positive in blocks, league average in steals, positive in field goal, free throw. His turnovers were weirdly high, but I bet they come down this year for KD. And so then you say, all right, if I have Kevin Durant in the first, I can decide what my team build is going to look like with my second round pick. You can do that with Luka. You can do that with Jokic. You can do it a little bit with maybe Jason Tatum, although maybe not quite as much. He has a little more of the up and down. Shea, there's a little bit of that as well. The difference for me between going, Shea early and Kevin Durant late in the first round is that early in the first round, maybe that's not the right way to frame it. The guys that are big time positive in things, like a Victor Wembanyama, it's just more intense than like a Trae Young. The negatives are smaller, the positives are bigger. So at the back end of the first round, when you're like, I'm gonna use my second round pick to decide what my team is going to look like, the guys in the second round are still better than the ones going towards the end of it. And then also, you don't have access to the game breaker type of players like Jokic, like Wemby, like Luka, if his playoff schedule was better. All right, now we're actually going to wrap it up. Coming up later on today here on Thursday, we're going to be breaking down picks 26, not 25, 26 through 50 on the brand new Yahoo board. Those seem to be crowd favorites, and I put it off for a couple of days, so we'll get into that. Now, tomorrow, very excited. Rhett and I are picking out a time to record. I am going to be sitting back and enjoying because Rhett's been working, as I mentioned, on a secret plan to draft Joel Embiid in the first round and not have your team completely ruined if Embiid goes down for 2 months in the middle of the season. This is a potential life-changing moment for all of us, and I can't wait to hear what he's figured out. Also, on tomorrow, on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, we'll have 2 episodes again on Friday. Second episode will likely take us through the weekend. That will be either the steals and busts on the new board, or we can get into some of those late round guys because those are, that's the stuff that everybody wants to hear first. We'll get those into you guys before your very early drafts are taking place. And then over the weekend, we'll knock out 2, most likely, of our remaining 3 team previews. We are almost finally done with those. And when they're done, weekends become mock draft time, much to all of your delights, I'm sure. I'm Dan Besbris. Thanks again to Raph. At Dan Besbris on Twitter, at Old Man Squad. Please like and rate and subscribe. All of those things continue to help immeasurably. Our YouTube page is exploding right now, and I'm super grateful. I want to make sure the Spotify and the Apple stuff explodes as well. And I guess that's that. Have a great few hours, and I'll be back with you guys in the afternoon. So long for now.